Those are some of the Americans that we'll be hearing from today with some advice for George Bush. It's worth noting that almost all of them talked about the spirit of the country, ready to get on with problem solving. And Alan Greenspan, who's the chairman of the Federal Reserve, was saying to me this week that he said it's hard for us who are economists and try to project these kinds of things to gauge how much determination there is out there, how much volunteerism there is, how much sacrifice people are willing to make. But his sense of it is that people are ready now to make some sacrifices to deal with the deficit and some of these other problems. We'll see in the weeks ahead. We'll be back with more from Washington right after this on our Inauguration 89.
Stephen Gilman, thank you very much. Thank you. Tom?
Thank you, Douglas Kiker. Back to the White House. President and Mrs. Reagan, President-elect and Mrs. Bush,
any final
Vice President-elect and Mrs.
Any
Dan
final
Quayle.
thoughts to the American public before you leave office?
Any final thoughts? And I can read George Bush's lips, but not the President's from his distance end, so I couldn't tell what was being said there. Traditionally, of course, the President and the President-elect ride together in a short drive to the White House. They're a little bit behind schedule. They're due to arrive up there at 11:05. It's probably going to be slightly longer than a 5-minute drive, although they conceivably could make it. After all, there's no other traffic on their motorcade route, and they do have security on their side, not likely to get a ticket.
What were the watchwords in town this week? If you're not a wheel, don't drive?
That's right. There's been gridlock with taxis and limos especially. Many of them running for $3,000 for the week. This is, after all, a Republican administration. They like a little display of their wealth, and a limousine is one way to do it.
Although I guess there are limits to the wealth. We were hearing from Mike Jensen a little bit earlier that there were 5 $1,500 a plate dinners, and 3 of them had to be canceled because they couldn't fill the house. So, as Michael said, they may be rich, but they're not stupid.
Well, now we'll get the cars right. That's the new one that they're in there with the presidential flag on the left bumper and the American flag on the right bumper. Secret Service details surrounding the car. The new $600,000 armor-plated limousine will be shipped to various presidential appearances it'll make because security is an enormous consideration, and also because it's wired for sound, as they say. I mean, it's a traveling communication center for the President of the United States. I've never been in the presidential limousine itself, although I've traveled in presidential motorcades on short notice from the White House, and as you go dashing across Washington, it's kind of fun. They weave in and out of the traffic, and the things are cleared, and you kind of get to where you're going in a hurry.
The route they'll travel is one that has been swept pretty clear. All boxes, mailboxes, newspaper boxes have been taken away. All manhole covers have been riveted shut. There are armed guards on the rooftops, and they've swept it pretty clean.
It's a little different than 1937. This is how NBC Radio described its coverage of the parade in those days. We said at that time, in order to broadcast a worm's eye view of the paraders, NBC is constructing a special glass manhole on Pennsylvania Avenue, and in the manhole will be an announcer describing the hobnail boots and the cavalry passing overhead. Our man in the hole now.
Tell him to come to me.
Deborah Norville.
All right, Tom, I couldn't help but laugh at your story about the glass manhole cover of providing NBC's worm's eye view of that inaugural event some years ago. If you can look closely as the parade passes by, or as the inaugural procession passes by, take a look at the manhole covers. If you can get a glimpse of them as the cars pass, you'll see that they have been painted over. The Secret Service and the other security experts have come through the entire motorcade route and painted over the tops of the manhole covers after looking inside first and making sure that there was nothing of any security risk inside. They'll be able to tell with just a glance whether those manholes have been tampered with or not. It's interesting to note, too, as the motorcade comes our way here on Pennsylvania Avenue, that, as you mentioned before, this is the first time in 60 years that the power of the presidency has remained with the same party. We've talked many times the fact that George Bush is the first vice president since Martin Van Buren to accede to the presidency. The Democrats are willing to acknowledge that one, but they're also quick to point out that Martin Van Buren served only one term in the presidency. And while this is certainly George Bush's day, they are looking for years from now.
It's kind of funny, dear old Marty hasn't gotten much attention in the last 100 years as he has the past 100 days.
George Bush said in Texas right after his election was complete, he raised his eyes skyward and said, "Thank you, Marty," Martin Van Buren. The transfer of power is now less than an hour away if we stay on schedule, and they can pick it up because there's a kind of a holding room inside here. That's Senator Wendell Ford of Kentucky, who's running the festivities up here on behalf of Congress. The new President of the United States, soon to be.
President Reagan, any words for us today?
Not spending too much time on the attire. As you can see, the president-elect in a business suit. We were told that is just basically his style.
Any last thoughts today? President-elect Bush, any last thoughts for us?
Any last thoughts today is the question. Didn't get much of an answer, but we were told basically that that is the informality is the president-elect's style. It's just the way he chose to go. You'll remember that President Reagan, when he came in 81, wore the tails, the formal suit.
And John Kennedy, who talked about this being a day in which the torch is passed from one generation to another, wore a top hat. The last time that we've seen that.
That's the holding room that Tom alluded to just moments ago, where the principals involved will spend a little time, and then they will make there's Vice President-elect Quayle and Marilyn Quayle, along with Congressman Foley, who is also part of the Joint Congressional Inaugural Committee, again under the guidance of Senator Ford.
The faces of America assembled on the west front of the White House, of the Capitol, awaiting the arrival of Ronald Reagan and George Bush and Dan Quayle. The transfer of power about to take place. Members of the diplomatic corps are invited as well today. And members of the U.S. Supreme Court are there in the background. You see Sandra Day O'Connor on the right-hand side of your screen. Justice Byron Whizzer-White just coming into view with the glasses.
Justice O'Connor will be giving the oath of office to Dan Quayle. You got to wonder if Marilyn Quayle had something to do with that. Tradition has it the Chief Justice gives it, but Marilyn Quayle has said that Sandra Day O'Connor is her role model, and she will be giving the oath to Dan Quayle.
A lot of people are not yet able to take their place on the lawn because they have to pass through metal screening devices for security purposes, and they're not able to get through there quickly enough.
Yes, I do. I hear you fine.
You see Chief Justice Rehnquist.
Antonin Scalia, Warren Burger coming down, yes.
Warren Burger, who's been invited back, the former Chief Justice of the United States.
Okay.
We can hear Andrea Mitchell in the background. Let's go to her. Andrea?
Hi, Brian. I have the best seat of all today. I am only about 30 yards from where the President-elect will be sworn in. I'm standing amidst the Senate.